I set out to compile a list of the 5 best Flash platformers of all time, and instantly a dozen games came to mind. And after I went digging through various sites and resources for reminders of any games I may have forgotten, I quickly realized how many quality platformers I've never even played. Puzzlers, run and guns, arena shooters, story-based adventures, Metroidvanias, and many more. It became apparent a definitive best-of list would be impossible. So instead, I'm starting with a list of my personal favorites, and if the demand is there, I could always make follow-up videos highlighting other collections of excellent Flash platformers. So today I'll be focusing on games where platforming is really the be-all end-all of the experience. First up is William and Sly. More specifically, I want to look at William and Sly 2. While every game on this list made an impression on me for one reason or another, William and Sly broke down the walls of what a Flash game could look like. I had played 1,000 generic vector-based Flash platformers, had seen games that made use of pre-rendered graphics, and those select few that embraced the more artistic side of the medium. Never before had I seen all those elements brought together so spectacularly in my browser. The first William and Sly game is silky smooth, gorgeous to look at, and blissfully relaxing in its atmosphere and presentation. However, the simple gameplay and story don't offer a lot of variety, and the final boss is a bit of a weak note to end it all on. William and Sly 2 then took everything that worked about the original, gave it a fresh coat of paint, and elevated the series into something truly one of a kind. The gameplay is still kept minimalistic, but there's actually a story at hand to be unraveled. Apparently, springtime is bulking season for William. Making him so jacked and suntanning outside of the cabin was always a bit of a weird choice. One of many spectacles to be found in this world. There's a few light puzzles to be solved, some additional abilities to unlock, and just a general sense of wonder and discovery that was greatly improved from the original game. And honestly, you could just leave this game open in the background for hours to enjoy the beautiful soundtrack. Just this last June, Lucas announced that he had already made a complete third game. This all-new William and Sly is fully 3D while still having those open-world, semi-collectathon, semi-Metroidvania elements in place. After that announcement, I showed up rambling in Lucas's inbox, warning him not to race to launch lest he miss some key marketing opportunities. Releasing Flash games back in the day was as simple as clicking upload. Navigating a commercial release is a little more complicated. We got to talking, and Two Left Thumbs came on as the publisher for William and Sly. Recently, in December, we brought the original 2 titles to Steam for free as the Classic Collection, letting you play them in full screen 60 frames per second with a controller. And this entirely brand new game launched today. You can go and buy it right now. And yes, this launch did largely motivate this video topic. It's a sort of chicken and egg situation. My genuine lifetime of Flash game fandom is what led to me pursuing publishing William and Sly, and if I can help support a legendary developer by bumping up a planned video in my schedule, then yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. The original 2 William and Sly games are some of the best Flash platformers ever made, and it's an honor to be able to share that fandom with you all now. And look at how stunning the new game looks. Playing through it myself, I really love stumbling across the little cave networks, or fast traveling around using these cannon-like fly traps, or just soaking in the beautiful landscape while one of the new tracks composed for this game showers itself over my brain. If you've never played the originals before, go check out that Classic Collection, and please be sure to add the new game to your wishlist. I will have links down below. Nowadays, I think Pixel Jam are most likely well known as the indie publishers behind the hit arcade roguelike Nova Drift, and more recently the Star Fox-inspired X Zodiac. However, Pixel Jam have been making their own games for nearly 2 decades, with their biggest hit easily being Dino Run. Now, this isn't an auto runner, but you do need to keep running, as a wall of doom is continuously pushing its way towards you. Race off to the right, avoiding obstacles, interacting with some silly physics. Maybe you get scooped up by a pterodactyl, gobbling up some smaller dinos for DNA to upgrade your abilities. There are challenge, speedrun, and multiplayer modes that all really boil down to running to the right quickly, and there are a handful of cosmetics and other fun unlocks to be acquired. While it's a little more common now, using big, chunky retro pixels was not at all a common art style at the time, and Pixel Jam did an incredible job of making that feel modern and appealing. Looking at it, it's just immediately apparent it was a choice rather than any sort of limitations of talent. Dino Run has been followed up on and remixed several times, not as many as some, but it's up there. This initial game was followed up by Marathon of Doom, which is one giant endless Dino Run level, and Enter Planet D, a sequel to the original game, although it's somewhat unclear to me precisely everything that has changed. It mostly just seems like the difficulty has been dialed up and the amount of things going on is just a little more insane. The original game was updated further with an SE edition, then being taken further yet again with the DX version. I'm actually not 100% certain what the trajectory of improvements were, but I do know where it ended up with DX. There is a refinement to the physics, the game has been pumped up full of secrets, Easter eggs, and unlocks, multiplayer was added more directly into the game, and generally everything has been enhanced. While it's still fun to go back to the original, the DX version is really the definitive way to play this game, and it's only $5 over on Steam. So that's well worth it in my eyes, and you're pretty directly contributing to the sequel. The road towards Dino Run 2 has been rather winding and obviously quite challenging. Back in 2013, Pixel Jam managed to raise half of a pretty lofty goal, but because Kickstarter's all or nothing, they were back down to zero. They then spent years operating a goal-based private crowdfunding campaign on their website, one that wouldn't expire and send all the money back to contributors. They inched the game further along through that, then topping it off further with a much smaller exploratory Kickstarter, and expanding things with a Patreon. That all seems to have mostly served just to keep the train on the tracks, and finally, all these years later, I think probably largely due to Pixel Jam's found success as publishers, there is now a Dino Run 2 Steam page, an alpha build available for supporters, and seemingly a path to release. This game has always been an absolute gem, so I'm happy to remind people of its existence, and hopefully they have some newfound success with the upcoming sequel. With this next game, if you know, you know. I'm not sure if others out there would view Robot Unicorn Attack as a meme game or something more legitimate, considering there are other auto runners in this video that are pretty inarguably the better games. Those unfamiliar may be questioning why something so simplistic made the list. But with the frequency this game has popped into my head over the years and how satisfying that itch is to scratch each and every time, how could I possibly exclude Robot Unicorn Attack? It is the simplest possible version of an auto runner. You can jump, double jump, and dash. There are something like 10 different variations on the platforms you jump between. You collect fairies, smash stars, and run alongside dolphins sometimes, I guess. I really don't think anyone would have remembered this game if not for the hilariously campy, happy, and completely catchy song. That's the most I'm willing to play of it, lest I risk this entire video being copyright flagged and completely demonetized. But if you've ever heard that before, I expect the entire song just raced its way back into your brain faster than a rocket-powered robotic unicorn. As you continue to chain together jumps and stars, you'll inevitably get going so fast you can hardly see a thing. Then you'll unluckily catch a rock, have a janky-looking PNG explosion, and your beautiful robot head crashes into the screen. That outcome is so predictable, it's hardly even fun, since the game's ramping speed sorta smooths out any skill curve that may have existed. And I continue to not care, because I've never played this game without the biggest, silliest grin on my face the entire time. I know Adult Swim made multiple sequels to this game and supported some mobile ports and various installments, yet I've never once cared about anything other than the original. It's short, simple, and not a hair more complicated than it needed to be, and I'll always love it for that. And funnily enough, Pixel Jam later did a demake of this classic as Retro Unicorn Attack. It doesn't quite have the same charm, it's maybe even just a little bit too polished for that. However, this music is instead safe to include, so I've instead aped that, and that is what is playing under this section of the video instead. Platform Racing 2. This one is a little sad to include, as the experience I knew and loved isn't really available anymore. There are still ways to play the game, but as one of the few Flash games made to be fully multiplayer, running around in this alone doesn't really feel the same. In fact, I'm instead left to confront how rough around the edges this actually is. The art is serviceable, and the menus are specifically quite rough looking, but none of that mattered because of how quick and easy it was to jump in and play against others around the world. This was one of the most popular games on sites like Congregate, where they specifically measured how many of their users were turning into fans and addicts of this game. That's genuinely how they started measuring things, because of how often users were coming back to the site just to play this. You would create a custom little Rayman-like runner, drop into a massive selection of player-made levels, aiming to finish first so you could earn additional cosmetics and points to upgrade your abilities. I never really found that players simply won by having high stats. Maybe it's because there was a hard roof there and sooner or later everyone had high stats, but I found it pretty well always came down to a familiarity with the level. The paths were very simple, but there were many specialized blocks. There are these speeders that you'll actually stick to that can be used to launch upwards, blocks you have to break, those that fade when touched, move when touched, or ones that fade yet keep you suspended, others that simply reset your position, or those that contain items. None of it is that complex, but then you set some creative people loose on a level maker, and things started to get a little crazy. A really common approach was for creators to paint in narratives into the background. That level of artistic freedom is really cool, but the most fun levels were the crazy ones that just sort of launched you around and provided lots of weapons and opportunities for you to mess with one another. Meanwhile, pro players would wait off to the side, camping out for newbies to trigger bombs and clear paths for them, so they could then slip in and claim the win right at the end. It was a lot of fun to learn to do those yourself and steal a couple wins off others. Platform racing was incredibly easy to pick up and played a little like Mario Maker 7 years earlier than that, and a little like Fall Guys 12 years earlier. I had so many hours of fun with this one, and only just learned today its creator, Jigman, actually worked with Brian Fargo and In Exile back in 2010 to create a third entry. Shortly after a public beta, a bunch of the In Exile team was laid off, including their arm responsible for browser games. Things sort of fell apart from there, and the game was never actually finished. Even later still, a fourth platform racer was attempted, and it was never finished either. I may have to do a full video on Jigman and this series someday, as there are seemingly some crazy stories there. After a closure of Jigman.com, there was a revival with Jigman 2. There's actually a forums over there that is still relatively active, and largely centered around the Platform Racing 2 community, doing their best to keep things alive and well. I couldn't find any recent updates on what Jigman may or may not want to do with the series, but I know years ago he expressed an interest in coming back to it, and I hope we can see a proper revival someday. Spewer. How do I have a list of best platformers without an appearance from Ed McMillan? Some of Ed's earliest games were platformers, and it's a genre he's continued to come back to throughout his career. After making Meat Boy, but before launching the full commercial title of Super Meat Boy, Ed had a very focused period of platformer greatness. Meat Boy set him down a path of indie gaming legend, and while I suspect Time Fakuk is overall the better game, I've always had a soft spot for his disgusting little title, Spewer. You play as an experimental little larval creature, eating and puking your way through several chapters of puzzling single-screen platforming. I've specifically left puzzle platformers off of this list otherwise, as I think I would someday just make a video dedicated to those. But the reason Spewer makes it onto this list instead is because I consider the puzzle elements to be quite light. Things are never puzzling because it's unclear what you need to do. They're puzzling because wrangling this ridiculous physics can often make levels more difficult than they need to be. I have so much fun messing around with the physics, it felt unlike anything else when it came out. And as you make it deeper into the game and start swapping spews, that's when things start getting especially fun. Hey, I recognize that sound effect. This game has always suffered from performance issues. I imagine largely because the liquid physics being done here is rather complex and definitely pushing the limits of Flash. But I suspect the hefty amount of detailed animations and effects and things playing out in the background were also slowing things down. So I'd recommend maybe checking out the Basement Collection, which is over on Steam. Things run a heck of a lot better there, including some bonus levels, or you can play it totally for free on something like Flashpoint, which is where I would have recorded this footage. There was also a level editor in this game, but I never at any point messed around with making anything in it or playing things others had made. This game is memorable, but it is far from perfect. I find the hitboxes on the floor spikes to be ridiculously unforgiving, and the precision of your physics propulsion isn't quite consistent. I legitimately rage quit while recording on this level. There's this one step where you always have to wait for this puke to roll back down to you, only for the jumping and platforming to feel just off enough that these spikes unexpectedly killed me like 10 times in a row. Then you have to run back around, go back to this area, wait for everything to trickle back down to you, just to have a stupid pointless death again anyways. So there's a little bit of a love-hate relationship with this one. It's got a fair number of frustrations, but there are very few Flash titles I continue to come back to all these years later and take a quick run at 100%ing it just because. Ed's just got that secret sauce. What can I say? It's hard to resist. I would say rather broadly, auto runners are not typically my thing. Something like Robot Unicorn Attack gets a pass because it's just so ridiculous, charming, and enjoyable. But as with any genre, when it's done right, any preconceived notions that may have hampered your experience going in are immediately pushed aside, and you get to feel that enjoyment that everyone else seems to have in a genre you've always avoided. I think that's something that Rogue Soul 2 did for me way back when. The presentation and feel of this game are so polished that it skyrockets the game onto my own list of potential all-time best Flash platformers. Auto runner or manual. Not that anyone ever calls them manual runners, but you know what I'm saying. There's this very steady and comfortable introduction of new abilities. Run, slide, jump, double jump, pound jump, offensive projectiles, a parachute glide, and at the same time you're introduced to a variety of new enemies with different attack ranges and timings, new obstacles to parkour your way around, flowers to deliver, and eventually full-on boss battles. All the while, through every attempt, you're crossing off challenges, saving old men, and earning stars for additional unlockables. Soul Game Studios has always been good at controlling that content tap. You can't play any of their games without feeling every few minutes that you've either leveled up through stats, skill, or encountering some totally new twist on the game that you've already been playing for an hour. And as you're working your way through all of this, you will inevitably get better just through the act of practicing, to the point you eventually get comfortable enough to become a rogue soul, entering this free-flowing state of platforming and combat that scratches an itch nothing else on this list even comes close to. Simply surviving through a level is rarely challenging, but the game does a great job of motivating the player to try for the best. Completion isn't nearly enough. It's a game that insists on and encourages perfection. And the more attempts you make, the more that starts to feel attainable. You feel like a gamer god working your way through this. A couple years back, I did an entire video on Soul Game Studio and their original Soul characters, so I won't go digging into this game or history any deeper than that. Swords and Souls Never Seen was a huge success and afforded them the freedom to tackle an original game. Their first ever non-soul game, Mini Shoot Adventures, is due out this March. There's a demo for their wonderful take on a Metroidvania adventure available now. Definitely check that out, maybe give it a wish list. And they've teased in the past that they hope to someday do a Rogue Soul 3, and I would love if that were the next thing they tackled after Mini Shoot. And here it is, the final game on the list, although these weren't really intentionally done in any specific order. If anyone here opened this video questioning what number 1 would be, then I'll assume you never used a computer between 2006 and 2012. To this day, if you open up most Flash websites, after your eyes adjust to the assault of bland cookie-cutter web design, you are likely to see Fancy Pants somewhere on that front page list. This character and series is instantly recognizable by millions, not just as an icon of Flash games, browser gaming at large, but to many, an icon of platformers on the scale of Mario or Sonic. The Fancy Pants adventures are all about momentum. The worlds are a playground of platforms, ramps, spring pads, and loop-de-loops for you to race through and launch yourself off of. These games were released as worlds, and with each subsequent installment, the engine was refined to grant the player greater control and freedom in how they tackle each level, now elevating to a point of free running style that Mario could only ever dream of. Across the original Flash-based Worlds 1, 2, and 3, the story became more elaborate, more collectibles and secrets were tucked away, and exploration was generally made more rewarding. There's a reason it was one of the first and only Flash games to be given the commercial treatment way back when, being ported over to the Xbox 360 and PlayStation Network. Those versions are still available, but with shutdowns coming in July, there isn't long left to pick those up. And as they were developed by a separate studio, their future is kind of unknown. However, all 3 of those original worlds are being enhanced, and for a few of them being completely remade for the sake of the Fancy Pants Adventures Classic Pack. Yes, I am bookending this video with plugs for 2 Left Thumbs published games. But again, my love for Flash far predates having a YouTube channel or publishing label, so it's no coincidence that I'm involved in these titles, and I think it's only fitting that I capitalize on my unique opportunity I have to share that fandom and promote these games all together in one place on YouTube. I've been working alongside Brad Bourne the last few years, and there's finally some massive news on that front. The Classic Pack bringing together those original 3 Flash worlds is available now in early access. There's a launch discount that will be running for 1 more week from today, and you can buy the game bundled with the Super Fancy Pants adventure, which 2 Left Thumbs has taken over publishing. So be sure to do that for the maximized discount. In the newly available Classic Pack, you can play enhanced versions of the original games, with things like a World 1 Remaster, Remix, and World 2 Remaster all being planned, with plenty more content to come, such as bonus games, tech demos, concept art, behind-the-scenes featurettes, and whatever else we can think to include. What more is there to say about Fancy Pants? I assume you've basically all played it, and it's kind of inarguable the way the series has improved over time. So while this list is generally staking out my favorite platformers of all time, I don't think anyone would be upset if Fancy Pants was placed as the best Flash platformer of all time. But if you would like to argue for any others, please let me know. And if or when I make an eventual follow-up on Flash game platformers, I'll have a whole list of your suggestions to pick from. One more call to action here. You have a whole suite of classic Flash platformers and their legacy sequels to go buy, play, and review over on Steam, so please check out any assortment of those that interests you. I have over 20 thoroughly researched videos on specific Flash game trends and genres and other topics within, and I'd like to make room to talk about these games more casually, where I can make the videos a little more quickly, share more of my fandom, and cover more games than I otherwise would be able to. So I'm looking forward to doing more of these Flash game genre specific videos in the future. But don't worry, the fully researched Flashlight videos aren't going anywhere. I still have plenty of plans for those. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.